by Bettie Brickhouse, right?
Yes.
That's the name you go by?
It is.
And tell me what do you call what you do?
I am a fetish wrestler or session wrestling. People pay me to wrestle them for generally an hour or two at a time. I also film wrestling customs, which means like men submit like a script. I say men, but mostly men, who they submit like a script of things that they want to see, and then I would basically act them out like some type of wrestling fantasy.
And this is a popular thing among men?
It's definitely got a large group of people that enjoy it. There are clients all over the country.
You're based where?
I'm in Chicago.
You're in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you have clients there, but you're traveling around the country as well.
Yeah, I have clients there. I've gone through years of traveling quite a bit, and then I've gone through years where I haven't traveled a lot. I think you'll find most session wrestlers or fetish wrestlers do that. You kind of have like a year on or a year off because you get really tired traveling all the time.
I understand that. And this is a sexual thing for these guys?
Sometimes, but not always. I definitely have had a lot of clients who they've told me that it is genuinely just they've always wanted to be roughhoused with a woman. They've roughhoused with men growing up, and they always really enjoyed that. And because it's more fun to have your body up against someone that you're interested in than man, if you're straight, then wrestling really is it for them. But I've also met a lot of them who wrestle men and women. There's actually like male versus male forums out there where you can find other men who will wrestle. You don't usually have to pay male wrestlers, but a lot of them will wrestle people of multiple genders. If they're genuinely into wrestling, then they do that. If it's more like a fetish for them, like if they're interested in like a foot fetish session, it's like the same kind of thing as wrestling. It's the same like very specific kink that they have.
But for your clients who hire you, they're clothed?
Most of the time, yeah.
No,
a lot of times they'll wear boxers or swimming trunks or something, but yes.
And where do you go to do this?
I have a studio in my basement. I have like 10 by 10 wrestling mats.
Oh.
As well as like when I'm traveling, what I typically do is I get a suite and I drop the mattress on the floor of the suite and then we'll wrestle on there.
That works out. That's funny. So these men are former wrestlers, or they're just guys that like to roughhouse with women?
Most of the time, they're just guys that like to roughhouse with women. I will say that I definitely have a handful of clients that were wrestlers in high school. And like, I guess wrestling a lot gave them this fantasy of like losing to a woman. I would say a lot of my clients are definitely into the losing aspect. There's very few clients that I run into that like really, truly want to win.
Is this a little bit of a dominatrix, submissive?
A little bit, yeah. I don't know. A lot of them don't want the other aspect that comes with domination. Like they don't really want to be spanked. They don't really want to have like a collar put on them. They just literally want to be overpowered. They want to be pinned to the ground. They want to know that the woman is stronger than them and that they're weaker. Interesting.
And this is, these guys are married, or is this something?
All over the map. I've definitely had married clients. I would say that I've run into less married clients than single guys. I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe because kink and alternative lifestyles are becoming more mainstream, so you don't have to hide it from your partner the way that you did. I think for some of them they view it like going to a strip club because they're not actually engaging in anything that could be considered cheating. But it's still I'm sure the wife would consider it, like going to a strip club or worse.
It's probably healthy that the fetish kink community is becoming a little more mainstream.
Definitely agreed. Yeah. I'm very happy to see that. I would much rather see even less clients, but more people having satisfied their kinks out in the world without, needing to basically hide what they're interested in.
Yeah, there's so much shame that could be connected with all these kind of behaviors.
Exactly.
And there's really no need for it.
No, it's really stigmatized. Definitely a thing in the kink community is like, your kink is not my kink. It's a thing that we say a lot. And I've gotten a lot of very strange requests over the years. Like I even like wrote them all down in a Google Doc one time just so that I could reference them like when I'm 30 years from now when I'm not doing this anymore. Just because some of them are just very bizarre and specific. But I still don't actually judge any of them for having them. I just think they're really funny because they're so unusual.
I interviewed someone recently who is an adult baby diaper lover.
Yes.
Which for a grown man to come out and say that he likes to wear diapers, you would think that'd be a humiliating thing. But it was funny to hear him speak about it. Just about like he's talking about how he likes to wear blue jeans.
Yeah, some of them feel that way.
And it kind of took the shame out of the equation.
Absolutely.
You actually liked him much more because he was so open and honest about it.
Understandable. Yeah. I don't personally, that's one of those things that I definitely, every time it comes up, I'm like, it's your kink is not my kink. Because I've had requests for people to do like, they'll like to combine kinks, like let's wrestle while in diapers. Or let's wrestle. It's not just that. Like they'll be like, let's wrestle with your foot in my face. Like that's how I want you to win. Or they just have very specific interests. And a lot of times they don't feel shame about it. Sometimes they feel intense shame. But a lot of times they're just like, this is what I like, and I'm here, and I am paying you to do this, and we're gonna have a good time.
It's almost like, I don't know what the word is. It's almost like heartwarming to see somebody who has gotten over their shame.
Absolutely.
And just kind of like, this is just what I'm into.
Yes, I'm 100% there. And I'm super non-judgmental when I'm with people. So I think that they feel more comfortable getting over their shame. And then I think once you've sort of taken that first step, it's easier to feel that with people who might try to shame you.
Yeah. No, I interviewed someone else recently who, a couple of gentlemen actually who like to hire transgender prostitutes. Mm-hmm. And the way these guys spoke about it was like, it's like, that's what I had for lunch yesterday. It was like no big deal.
That's funny.
And it was funny, like by the end of the talk, you realized he's just talking about what he enjoys.
Yep.
And it wasn't like this thing that normally we would be like, oh, what a creep.
Right.
Not at all.
I mean, I think as soon as you start putting money into the equation and consent, I feel like creep should be taken out of the language altogether. Like you were paying for a service. Who cares what that service is? And as long as you've done everything that you've discussed beforehand and it's all consensual, like there should be no shame around it. Personally,
not hurting anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And like both people are benefiting from it in that situation. You know, like the person who's being paid to do the service is getting something out of it. And maybe it's even their kink, but that person who's paying is getting their kink satisfied.
And both people are probably wearing a smile for a few days afterwards.
Absolutely.
And that's only a good thing.
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of joy out of giving people something that they've really wanted or have really struggled to get. And I get a lot of clients like that in particular because it's very rare to find a woman that can genuinely overpower you, even though there are hundreds of session wrestlers out there. Most of them are not actually stronger than all men.
Do some men like these smaller women that will be easier to wrestle, but they just like wrestling with them?
They love the idea of these women being super strong. A lot of them will target in particular bodybuilders, but they don't realize that bodybuilders don't actually have a lot of strength outside of the very specific movements that they do. And so when they wrestle me, I can actually win. The only time I have lost against men is if they have 100 pounds on me or more. I've always been strong, and I do a lot of sports. Like I play roller derby and I do sword fighting. I do a lot of sports to keep that way. And I can, literally pick someone up and lift them over my head if they're under a certain weight. and so that's what some of these guys really have always truly wanted, is to like actually lose and like fight back as hard as they can and then still lose. And so I definitely feel special when I'm able to do that, because a lot of people can't, and a lot of them are still even weaker than bodybuilders or powerlifters or anything else. They're just like a lot of men just haven't done anything to work out or build up their strength. But if they have done any kind of sport, then almost always their strength overpowers women.
How did you discover that this was a thing you could do?
So when I was 19, I was a broke college student, and I constantly scoured Craigslist in the gigs section. I picked up a lot of doing a lot of photography stuff. I worked a lot of events, but one of the ones that came up was, if you are a strong woman, I will pay you $150 to wrestle me. There's no sex. We'll both be fully clothed. You can wear whatever you want, and I'll meet you in advance and we can have coffee so that you know that I'm not a creeper. And I was like, sold. I knew I was strong. I've always known that. And I was playing roller derby at the time anyway. And so I met him for coffee, I think twice, because I was nervous about it. And he was just a super sweet old trucker who was honestly using his Social Security. He was saving it up every paycheck so that he could pay for a session. And after the first time we had a session, he was like, oh my God, you're so good at this. You need to get on Session Girls. And then there was another site at the time called WB 270. And I was like, okay. And I did. I didn't get a lot of clients because I lived in Louisville, Kentucky at the time, which is not a huge center for travel or for, I guess there's just not a lot of people that are interested in wrestling down there. I only got a couple of people in the city. But when I traveled, I would get lit up with people interested in wrestling me in all of these different cities.
Bigger cities have more of it?
Usually. I
would think that would be the case with most of the fetish kink crowd.
It's so the problem with bigger cities is I go to New York City or I go to LA, or LA is a bad example, but let's go with I go to New York City. There are already 15 session wrestlers in New York City. So if somebody is really interested in wrestling, they could have kind of an ongoing relationship with this wrestler. And so I don't get a lot of work when I go to New York City. And I've talked to a lot of other wrestlers and they feel the same way. Really, you want to go someplace, there's kind of a sweet spot where you want to go someplace where there are people, but not necessarily competition, or a lot of competition at least. And a lot of us do better in the South where it's more conservative, or DC. Almost all of us do well in DC.
Interesting how different regions have.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've come to LA probably a dozen times at this point, and I get shoots when I'm here, but I don't think I've ever gotten a session.
Interesting.
Yeah. Whereas when I have gone to Kansas City, I'll have 5 in one day. So it's really all over the map for me.
What's the craziest interaction you've had with your clients?
The weirdest request that I had, and this did not turn into a session, but the weirdest request that I had was that he wanted to rent an Airbnb with a giant swimming pool. And he wanted me to dress up like a bodyguard in heels. And he was supposed to be like a burglar, and I was supposed to tackle him into the water and hold him under the water and let him come up to breathe every once in a while. And at some point, my heel was supposed to come off. It was going to dangle off of my foot and go to the bottom. And I was going to tie him up and make him go to the bottom of the pool and pick up the heel with his mouth. I mean, it was that level of detail down to the minute, and it was all wrestling oriented in terms of he wanted me to be overpowering him this whole time.
That's his fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. But he didn't live in a place where I think I ever traveled. Still to this day, I don't think I've ever traveled because it was definitely very rural. And a lot of times, I'll be like, okay, you can sponsor me to go somewhere. You can pay for my flight, you can pay for my hotel, then you have to book at least a couple of hour session. And a lot of times that becomes $700 to $1,000, which is just a lot out of the budget for these people. For a session that actually happened, I feel like my wrestling guys, I'm a dominatrix as well. I feel like they are have a lot more specific desires. The wrestling guys, I feel like don't have as eclectic interests. I did recently wrestle somebody on my mats outside at midnight in his yard.
Outside?
Yes. And I was like, are your neighbors going to see? And he was like, no, they're 80. His house was he didn't have a 10 by 10 space that we could put the mats out. So we put the mats out on his grass in his yard.
Everyone is so much more interesting if you really knew the honest truth of what their lives are about.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like I wish that we were more comfortable as a society talking about that. Like, I know that in my neighborhood, they all think that I'm like the weirdo. But I'm like, I'm sure they all have stuff going on too. Right. Like, hopefully. I mean, I don't know. I've met a lot of people who definitely self-describe as boring.
Those are the scariest ones.
Right. Right.
And do you make a living just from this, or do you have other work that you do?
I do not make a living from this. I've definitely met people who have, but usually for you to make a living, you have to be able to dedicate not only your time to traveling quite a bit, but to filming a lot. Really where the money is right now. Like, while sessions, you can make $350. I make $350. A lot of women at this point make $500, $600 an hour. Like, while you can make money from sessions, like, you kind of advertise and you make a lot of money selling your clips on clips for sale. And so you can sell,
or OnlyFans probably.
Or OnlyFans. Yeah. OnlyFans is a little harder, I have found, just because there's either the subscription model or the pay-per-view, and you can't actually download the clips. And a lot of times that I've seen these wrestling guys really want to be able to download the clip and like rewatch it. And so a lot of them are really interested in female versus female wrestling. They like watching female versus female wrestling. So there's a whole subset of these guys that like that's all they want. So they don't actually book sessions because they want to watch two female.
They want to watch two girls.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Do you do that sometimes as well?
I do female. Yeah. So actually after this, I'm going to go shoot with a local model who does some wrestling stuff, and we're gonna do some like a couple of custom films that will involve wrestling. But if you can maintain your clips for sale or your OnlyFans or like whatever it is that you're doing, and even if you focus on wrestling, like you can make a huge passive income. And there's a couple of like organizations that's all they do. Like up in Sacramento, there's Modest Moms Wrestling. Like that's what she does full time, is she films like visiting wrestlers. She doesn't do sessions at all. And all of hers are like very PG. Like you could put them on YouTube and they'd probably be fine. She films like visiting wrestlers, and she does like very staged pro wrestling type stuff in the ring that's in her garage. And like she makes a lot of money doing that. And there's another group in New York called Doom Maidens that they do a very similar thing. Now they'll do some like custom fetishy stuff too, or they'll do like face sitting videos where you're just pinning somebody by sitting on them. But like that's their whole gig. They don't even necessarily do like, not all of the girls that are on Doom Maidens necessarily do wrestling for sessions.
What have you learned about men from doing this kind of work?
Most of the time that they are super awkward and really uncomfortable. And it is your job to, as when you're doing this, to make them feel comfortable and to make them, sometimes they just want to talk. Sometimes they really are there for the conversation, just like booking an escort. You know, sometimes you talk a lot during that. But they have like this very specific kink, and it's a place that they're able to do it. In the U.S., when I've wrestled in Europe, I would say that the men are very pushy in a different way.
Yeah, different cultures.
Very different cultures. Very different cultures. Yeah, I've not. People have always asked me like whether I've had like negative experiences or like people that have tried to cause a problem or tried to do something that we didn't agree to. Not in the U.S. Like I can usually smell it a mile away, so I won't even session with the ones that are likely to be a problem.
Have you done sex work outside of this?
You
mentioned dominatrix.
Yeah. So I've done pro dom work or dominatrix work. And so I do that a lot. Some of my sessions have involved sex over the years. But you can't just email me and be like, hey, will you come have sex with me and I'll pay you? Like that's not really what I offer or what I do. I have zero judgment for the people that do. I've lived with escorts before. I don't think that I'm good enough with the girlfriend experience to really make that work for me. I think I'm too, in a lot of ways, domineering for that.
And this is certainly not something that's for everyone. This is only a specific type of guy, right?
I don't know. I feel like wrestling's kind of a growing interest. Like I've noticed locally that they've started offering like wrestling days at our dungeon, or like learn to wrestle days. I feel like I've seen more and more people get involved in like Brazilian jiu-jitsu over the years. Like there's a fully woman-owned studio in Chicago. And so I feel like I've seen a lot more interest in wrestling pop up over the years. I think people are starting to see it at dungeon parties. Like people will see the mats go down and it looks like a lot of fun. And it is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And so I think anyone could wrestle and have a good time with it. I don't know if it's for everyone in the sense that like I don't think everyone needs to pay a like fetish wrestler to have a session with them. But I think anyone can like roll around on the floor for a little while.
Yeah, I can imagine if you watched one of these matches, it could be something that really just becomes, wow, a guy might think that's something he wants to do.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like fun. Usually the people that are wrestling are laughing and having a good time.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Some of these guys have very like I have an intake form, like when you want to fill it out and like when you want to book with me. And like I have like all these options specifically for wrestling sessions. And like a pretty good portion of them want trash talk.
Oh, really?
That's a very common request.
So you're giving them some attitude while you're doing it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they want me to tell them that and they'll give me trash talk back too. They'll be like, "Oh, it's a joke, right? Oh, you're just a woman. You could never beat me," or something like that.
What kind of stuff are you saying to them?
That how pathetic is it that they thought that they had any chance with me at all? Like they should know better by now.
So you enjoy your work?
I do. I wouldn't do it if I didn't because I have a day job. I kind of sidestepped that earlier unintentionally. So I have a day job. I'm in marketing. I have my MBA and my doctorate. So I'm pretty involved in the business world as my day job. So I do this as like my side hustle essentially. And I go through periods of time where I don't really do it a lot. I've been renovating my house this summer and so I didn't do it as much. And now I've had like an influx of sessions this past couple of weeks, especially since I'm about to have surgery and I'm not going to be able to session for a little while. But yeah, I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it because I don't have to. It's not my full-time job and I have the luxury of being in that situation, whereas a lot of people don't. But I also I've been doing it for 11 years now. I've known that it would be really difficult to make this a full-time gig for me because most of the people that are interested in wrestling want a bodybuilder or a standard-sized woman. Like it's very niche for them to not only want to wrestle, but also to wrestle a plus-size person. And right now, there's really only 2 of us in the session world that are known. And like we get paired against each other all the time for customs or we did. She hasn't wrestled a lot. She's had a lot of illness this year, but we get paired against each other a lot. Like there's a whole like basically fetish wrestling events, the one was called Women on Fire. And it was in Vegas, and then they did it in Chicago one year too. And it's the woman who runs the Session Girls website, which is how you find a wrestler. And she basically puts all of these different wrestlers together to wrestle on stage as a part of the event. And then in the after party, you can pay one of these session wrestlers to wrestle you for like 20 minutes. And it's like $100 to do that versus like a full session if you just kind of want to get a taste of it and see if it's for you.
And have you found you must have websites or things like that. Where do you advertise what you do? Where can people find you if they want to book a session?
Most of the time, people find me on sessiongirls.com. It used to be WB270, but like I said, that's gone down. I have a Twitter as well that some people have found me through, but I would say that the majority of the Twitter folks want a domination session, whereas the Session Girls folks, like for sure, want wrestling sessions. I have a tryst, like a BDSM tryst. I don't know if I've ever gotten a wrestling session from that. And I don't really advertise outside of that because there's just not a lot of places to advertise like as a wrestler. I can advertise as a dominatrix who offers wrestling.
Are there guys who discovered that this was their thing? Or do they know this was their thing before they ever?
There are people who have booked with me and it's their first session ever because I'm very first time friendly. A lot of wrestlers or dominatrixes will not see someone who has no references. I don't know if it's that I am like really cocky or really stupid, but I don't actually I don't worry about that at all. So as long as they give me the deposit, like I have information about them and like I always have like safe calls set up. But so I see a lot of first timers. So I end up being their reference if they go on to see somebody else. And a lot of times like they will be like, okay, I want to try wrestling and I want to try face sitting and I want to try spanking and I want to and like they'll go through the list of things like because they don't know what they want. They don't know what they like. And there have definitely been a couple that have been like, yes, wrestling for me, for sure. And then there have been others that have been like, nah. Like it was cool because you liked it, but it's not for me. I'd rather do the spanking or I'd rather do the face sitting. That's more my interest. There have been people who've ended the session early because they've been like, yes, I thought that I was gonna like that, and it just didn't do it for me.
That's what makes the world go round.
Exactly.
All right, Bettie Brickhouse, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Super interesting. Thank you so much.